Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Deconversion Stories. And today I'm talking with Harry Margulies, who is the author of a book called, what is Ask Why It Is? Or Why Is It?
It's why is it exactly, yes.
That's right. He also, like myself, was raised in the Jewish faith. So first we're going to talk a little bit about how that went for him and how he found his way free from that sort of a belief system and why he decided to get into writing the book called Why Is It? And we'll go over some of the stuff that he's written about, because I find some of the questions that you posed in the book to be great, personally myself, especially the chapter 12 title for you and I both, because we were both raised as Jews. So anyways, Harry, what I do is I always ask people to, well, first and foremost, welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. 9 hours time difference, but we are just as if we're sitting together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing what the technology today can do, for sure. Now, Harry, I forgot to mention this to you. I always do an after party, which of course you're not obligated to do, because I know it's quite late where you are, and these shows generally go for about an hour. But if you're able and willing, you can pop in for a few minutes just to say hi to some of my friends afterwards. They probably love to say hello to you and maybe have a question or two.
That would be nice. And how would that work? I just stay online, or you invite me to another line?
I give you to a new link because I set them up separately. Okay. So,
okay.
And I usually
I'll be happy to.
That'd be great. I don't want to keep you up too late, of course, even though it is a weekend.
Do I look so old that I have to go to sleep? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. Just it's later there than it is here by a long shot. Right. So that's my primary concern, is that I'm not keeping you up later than you'd wish to be. That's all.
Thank you.
Anyways, so why don't you sort of take us on the journey of how you were kind of raised in it, and what those sort of things that you started noticing that you questioned and found your way out of it?
Well, let's not get too deep into this, but to go rather diligently through it.
Mm-hmm.
I was born to refugee parents, lived for the first 6 years of my life in a refugee camp in Austria.
Right.
Raised by rabbis into deep faith, fear of God.
Wow.
And 10 years after the war, we finally were allowed to come to Sweden. I can tell you that when I was 5 years old, I knew to read the most difficult Hebrew text, and I couldn't do it today. And when the rabbis left, they said, "You, Harry, you take care of it."
Mm-hmm.
And we came to Sweden when I was 6.5, 10 years after the war. And still religious, still a believer, raised in a not a terrifically religious home, but still. And at the age of 14, I started to think, this cannot be. God cannot be interested in what I eat, how I walk, what I do. Is that the best he can do? Is that really what God should be interested in? And I had never tasted non-kosher food, and I decided to do the following. I went to a hot dog stand in Malmo, and I bought a hot dog, and it felt like sacrilegious to have a hot dog.
Well, it depends. What did you put on the hot dog?
Mustard and ketchup. Then I had another one, and another one, and another one. When I had eaten 10, I had terrible stomach aches, and for a while I believed, God is punishing me. And I said, nah, he's not. I just had too many hot dogs. And that was my journey to reason and step away from faith, which led me to reading the Bible and New Testament, part of the Quran, starting to write for myself. And one of the books that had a really great influence on me was James Meachener's book about called The Source, which is a very interesting book. It's a book that on the outside has an archaeological dig in a hill in Israel. On the inside, every time they have a find, he has a short novel about historical accuracy, how that piece ended up there. And I found it so fascinating that somebody could make novels out of this in a real story. So I started reading the Bible. Then I started reading the New Testament. Then I started thinking about this more and more. And we can come back into the various ways that I've been thinking about this. I mean, if you look at it, what we have been raised with is a God that is rather impotent, not omnipotent.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
So when they wrote this stuff together, they figured out, let's have a God with the best science we can do. That's the best they knew at the time. So they created a God who in turn created a flat and square earth and the sun circling around it. That's what God created. Well, he failed because proof is we have a round small speck in the universe and we are traveling around the sun and we are nothing. So that alone tells you that the stories can be, and in any other book than Holy Text, people would have said, stop reading, can't be true. Mm. And we can go through a little more from first page and some forward, what actually tells me that it cannot be true. But I thought my conversion story is probably not that unusual, but I come from deep faith, fear of God, to absolutely understanding that reason rules.
Right.
So is there anything about my deconversion story? Otherwise, the journey has then been from 14 and forward. I went to university. I mean, it was quite funny. Malmö, where we ended up in Sweden, was a neo-Nazi capital of Europe. And at university, I had a Nazi professor who knew I was Jewish, and I knew him. Nobody to complain to. You just sat through it.
Well, how were you treated by this guy?
Well, we stared at each other, but I was pretty good student, so he gave me decent grades.
All right, well, that's fair enough, I guess. Yeah. Well, I guess he can't really, even though he was a Nazi, this is post-war, so he can't really get things all up and going again, that kind of treatment of people, because he would probably be escorted out of there pretty quickly.
Well, in those days, not so certainly. It was still quite a bit. I mean, it's not like when refugees arrive today. We arrived in Sweden, I was 6.5, and we had absolutely nothing. Everything started from scratch.
Oh, okay. So when you find your way free from the beliefs, like after you sort of said, this is all nonsense and whatnot, and you probably learned even more that solidified that in your university or college days for sure.
I did.
So how did that sort of affect your relationships with like your family and your friends and stuff like that?
Well, my mother, I remember once I told her when she had said something to me, she said, God can hear you. And I said, there is no God. And she bit her hand and said, no, he can really hear you. I should be scared. It didn't scare me. So listen, they had to accept who I was. And the best thing that I have learned in life, two things that I've learned in life that are very good. First of all, talk to people you don't agree with. You learn more.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you talk to somebody who has great beliefs, you learn how to handle it. If you only talk to people that are of my ilk, you learn nothing new.
You end up in
an echo chamber. The other one, exactly. And the other one is, when there is an issue, deal with it. You have to stand firm and say, this is I, this is me, and this is, if we're going to have any kind of relationship, accept me or not. And eventually they did. Took a while.
Yeah. Were they scared for you, I guess, thinking that you might...
I think it is more of an embarrassment, because, society, the congregations, a son that is leaving the faith, not so fun. So I think there's group pressure, and that is in all religious circles, isn't it? There's group pressure absolutely. In every one of these circles.
That's part of the cult mindset, if you ask me. It's kind of part of the cult mindset.
Well, I mean, I would say it's cult, and the other lesson I've learned is, isn't it funny, Neil, how when we... Oh, my earpiece is falling out.
I do that all the time.
Well, you have better ones than I do. When we speak about God and when we deal with all these religious issues, we do that with such respect towards the religious, and they demand it. Yeah. But in return, they don't give it back.
Nope. So funny how that works.
The more fervent the believer, the crazier they are against us. And my take is, when you indoctrinate it, and I feel sorry for them, you don't know. When you're brainwashed, you don't know.
That's right.
So they firmly believe that they are sitting with God in their back. They are right, and we just don't effing understand.
It's okay to swear on the show, by the way.
Okay.
We're past the 5 minutes where they actually monitor it and see if there's any naughty language.
Yeah. So starting with, I mean, shall I move on a little bit to the Bible? So just give you a hint
Sure, yeah,
before we
absolutely.
go to the book. I thought it might be interesting. So we start with the Bible, and who is this God? What does he do? Well, first of all, we know he talks to himself, and that is a weird thing because he is alone. There's nobody else in the universe. And by the way, first cause means somebody had to have him done to create it, but they don't talk about that. But that is the first cause.
Right.
What happens now? He says to himself, let there be light, because that's what the Bible says. And then suddenly there's light, which was, by the way, created 2 days before the sun. How the hell did that work?
Or any stars.
Or any stars, yes.
So there's no photons in the universe.
Yeah.
So where the hell did the light come from?
Yeah, exactly. And the moon was its own light source, and the earth was square and flat. But then the most funny thing in this is, then he pats his own back. The all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful God said, and he saw that it was good. Fucking hell, didn't he know when he created it? The man or the God who can see all futures of anybody, how can he be surprised at anything?
Mm-hmm.
Everything we do, he knows. There's no free will in anything because he knows.
Oh, no.
And even if there were free will, it would be horrible. So even starting there and then adding on to that, as you know, there are two different creation stories that are incompatible.
Mm-hmm.
In one, Adam and Eve were created together. In the other one, they took the rib, presented to the animal. Just doesn't work. They explain that away. And of course, that's how the faithful deal with faith, and that is misdirection. Talk about something else. And the one thing that I've learned that is also very important when you discuss with them is, we have now, as science has progressed, we have come to have a God of the gaps. So that is, you can't explain the first millisecond of the Big Bang. So that's
it's even smaller than that.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it's just for
like
the
Planck
I don't
time.
want to, yeah, I know exactly. Yeah. But they don't mind holy texts with big gaps. That they don't mind.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. I've used that argument before.
So they don't care whatever gaps there are. If you take all the four Gospels, put them together side by side and read them, nothing fits. Nothing. And yet, that is holy text. So what I'm saying is, holy texts are used as evidence of being right, although it is those texts that are being questioned. In no other discourse would you do that. If I say, this book is totally wrong, you say, tell me about it. Then I would say, no, on page 5 it says so. That's how you interpret it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
So from that, I have developed a theory about theology, which goes the following way. What is theology? You develop a system of examining God's will as if it were a real God and as if the stories were true. And I just thought, for fun, what if we said that we create a theology, or many theologies, around Harry Potter? We pretend he's real, we pretend he's a God, we create a huge number of theologies around that Harry Potter. Then we create Harry Potter sins that have to make you go to the institutions to beg for forgiveness, and suddenly you have a racket. The Harry Potter religion.
Would that make Voldemort Satan?
You know, Satan, it's a good point to bring up, because God, in the story of Job in the Bible, he puts limits on what Satan can do. He says, you can do this, you can do that, but you cannot take his life, which means he has the power. Why doesn't he get rid of the devil? But he doesn't.
Yeah.
So he's not all powerful. Then he's complicit with him. It just doesn't work. And yet they say, oh, it is all true. It is all where it is. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to go quickly onto the New Testament so we don't lose that a bit.
Sure.
Would you mind? Or, yeah.
Go for it.
And that is already on the first page of the New Testament. The Gospel of Matthew, according to Matthew, is Jesus' genealogy. Let me then go to the Gospel of Luke, that also has a genealogy. They are totally incompatible. Totally.
They're totally different.
Except on two bits. Both go over King David's house. Both go over Joseph, the husband of Mary. Now, what the heck is wrong with that? Well, Joseph wasn't the father, it was God. So the whole genealogy in both Gospels is totally screwed up. The husband of Mary is a stepfather, and they didn't get his father's name right. Now, in any other book, you would have said, we'll stop reading here. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But not in the Bible. This
Not
is
for
what
the
Jesus
faithful.
said. And you know what they say? She was a cousin of Jesus, and that way they had the same. This is God's effing word, and God has just inspired, to which I say, why didn't he inspire better? Why didn't God let us understand completely so we didn't have so many Harry Potter versions? We had to fight each other over it and kill each other over it while God is laughing upstairs.
Yeah, exactly. Why not make the word as clear as possible so there could not possibly be any misinterpretations?
And he chose not to. And here's
Of course.
the thing that I have the most difficulty with in religion, and that is that we are comparing. I mean, we're jumping a bit, and I know you lead me back. It's your audience. So I don't want to. Are you okay with how I do this now, or
Sure.
do you want me to
Absolutely.
step back? Yeah, no. So when we go forward and to science, what they say often is, well, if there's a watchmaker or an iPhone maker, it requires a human engineer. And I say, listen, God is not a human engineer. There's nothing he cannot do. So, for instance, if he wanted to save us, he could have created us with white titanium teeth, stainless steel skeleton, impregnable skin, have us live on air alone, never sullying the earth, never do anything, and he didn't. That would have been a creation to believe in. The fact that we live on an earth that is a small crust under magma that explodes from time to time, that a comet will come and kill us, and we will eventually explode in the sun, and we get sick, and babies get cancer. Where is God? And if there is one, how good is he?
That's right. Well, he can't be. If you just pointed out all of that, that immediately negates the whole thing that he is good.
Yeah, and adding to that, when he sends his only begotten son, that really irks me. So God sits on his throne and he says to himself, oh, I should forgive these people. Anyway, I knew it from the beginning. I should really forgive them. What should I do? I'll have a son with a virgin who has another husband soon. And then I'll send him to earth and I'll punish the heck out of him. Then I'll have him crucified. And then I'll have him resurrected. And then I can forgive the people. And all-powerful God could have done all of this and we would never have known. So that's another cruelty without any reason. And that brings us into theology, which is, why does he allow evil? And my point is, he allows evil because he's impotent. If he were omnipotent and wanted us well, why didn't he just make sure that he used good? And he can't. And he lets the devil or Satan live. He's all powerful. Why does he have to have a 1,000-year struggle with fallen angels? Why are there angels?
I don't know.
So when you have all of this in mind, I'm just saying, so you can understand how my journey developed to really deep going into the text. And since I've been working with international tax law most of my life, my job is to read texts for what they say, not for what somebody tells me they say. And I've been pretty good at that. So when I read biblical text, I don't look at it, what do they say it means? I look at it, what does supposedly God say, or what has he inspired? That's what I look at.
Yeah, the supposedly is the big part.
Supposedly, yes. So if you go a little further then and say, in Islam, this is not possible. In Islam, it is worse because that is the absolute truth and God's absolute word. That's what they say. That's what they believe. And this is the way the word got to Muhammad. God dictates it to the archangel Gabriel, who over 23 years dictates it to the illiterate man Muhammad, but with perfect memory, is a perfect man. And he eventually dictates it to his friends who write it down. And they check 3 versions to make sure they're all right. So this is God's true and only word. Now, the problem with that is Christians and Jews have given themselves a 2% let out. It's inspired by men.
Right.
But the Muslims don't have that. So when they then have Shia and Sunni interpretations, violent and peaceful interpretations, end result is obviously it is not a perfect book, and therefore very likely not God's word. Do you see what I'm saying? It can't be both.
Oh yeah.
It just can't.
That's right.
And I say, when so much violence has been committed in the name of Islam, in my chapter on that, why don't they show us that it's a religion of peace and not have texts like, if there is an infidel, an unbeliever, you should roast him. And when his skin is roasted through, he doesn't feel pain anymore. Let's change the skin so he gets pain again. The verse of the sword, which you must know. We don't have to go through all the details of it. It's going to be tiresome, but
a lot of the viewers here are aware of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So then we go from that to the 10 Commandments, which we know God wrote with his own hand. And really,
allegedly,
is that the best he can do as the constitution of religion? That's the core. And even Jesus later on, when he's angry at everything, first he comes to uphold the law, but then he says, why don't we do the following? Throw everything away. The earth is going to end very soon, within a generation, and just follow me. Give everything away. Hate your mother and father, which is breaking the commandments, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I would specifically want to go to the first of the commandments, which is, thou shalt have no other gods before or beside me.
Mm-hmm.
This is a God who knows all languages to come, all interpretations to come, what it means. And what does that mean? His own language. It means there are other gods. He just wants to be number one. He just wants to be nobody beside me, nobody before me. I just want to be number one. Now, isn't that amazing that God could not express himself? And this is the only thing compared to the Jews and Christians, Muslim got right. They have this one God and nothing else.
Mm. Well, as you well know, being raised in the Jewish faith as well as me, that there are books, that speak of other deities in league with the Judeo-Christian God, right? He had others.
Absolutely. In the first part of the Bible, God is the head of the council of God.
That's right.
Our God is stronger than your God. We will defeat you. What does that mean? So monotheism is the same as I say. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I said war. It's all about war. Yeah. Our God is better than your God. Except he has a problem with iron chariots, apparently. So.
He does. Yeah. He's got trouble with himself, mostly, I think. He's probably sitting on his throne.
Absolutely.
That's what he has trouble with. And I think, unfortunately, the indoctrinated in belief, the way I was as a young boy, the difficulty, what I have is a story with me, the difficulty of shedding that belief. That is an amazing, almost physically painful. I don't know if you've gone through the same, but it is, you're so used to it. And that is why among the very many Christian denominations, very many, all of them go around believing that I have the right faith, Jesus will save me. The other billions will go under. First of all, where's the love? Where is the love in that? Where's Jesus' love? Let's just understand it. That's not a love message. And so looking at that, it is an awful message. And since all of them cannot be right, all of them are probably wrong. And not even probably, they must be. Because why would God have created all these many ways of worshiping him, worshiping Jesus, and you don't know which one? Very likely, since Jesus had brothers and sisters, which many people don't know, and his brother James was for in the early church, as it's called, to uphold the law, which means to have synagogues. And now this has gone outwards. And what has happened is that the churches and synagogues have become social organizations no longer in the service of God. That's right. You allow female priests, I don't give a hoot. But when you allow them, you're against Jesus' word, who said, woman should not teach man. Yeah. Right. So then it's not. So I think that's a little bit, and the other question is the Bible a moral book? Just look at chapter 1. First page, first son kills his brother and gets away with it and gets a mark on his forehead. But listen to this one, gets a mark on his forehead so he can leave the Garden of Eden and nobody kills him. Who the F would be there to kill him? There's nobody else.
But there were other people, apparently.
Yeah, but God must have missed that because he created Adam and Eve and only the ones in the garden. That story, by the way, has rivers and countries of gold, which proves it's written by people who knew this already. I mean, it's just made up, but nobody wants to believe that is the case. So they still want to have something to worship.
I'm pretty sure Keith Richards was around too.
He was probably around, as he was. So I have, since you have gone through my book, I use a quote by Mark Twain, which I think is fabulous for my book.
Oh.
And it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. And that's exactly how it works. You indoctrinate them and you make them believe.
That's right.
Now, if we want to move forward from this, so I mean, just another example. So God created us with Adam and Eve, and they fucked up. God gave them,
which he would have known about too.
Of course,
he would have known ahead of time.
Fuck up, and so he said to them, "Don't eat from this fruit. Everything else you can do." And then the snake comes and talks to Eve, and Eve says, "Oh, honey, why don't we try that? We will know so much more." First of all, God knew it. Secondly, why is he all-powerful, afraid of anything humans can do? Anything.
Right.
No reason. And then they eat of the fruit, and this is the fall of man. So this is how this works now. We are now suffering from original sin. What kind of a God is that? From 7,000 years back, we are suffering from original sin. That's biblical times, by the way. And the only way to get rid of that is to sprinkle a little bit of water on a baby's forehead.
Yeah, seems like a simple solution, right?
Yeah, and God must approve of it because it seems working. What I think is that has just been made so that people have reasons to go into their congregations and spend money, and it's a racket.
Of course it is. I mean, not a lot of. Well, let's put it this way: synagogues don't really put out the whole tithing thing, but they are always encouraged to donate to the synagogues and to. Just like every other churches and whatnot, they all have the tithing thing. But and I find it horrendous that the people that they target the most are the ones that really can't afford it.
Oh yeah, and the worst ones are the televangelists. They are crazy. They're crazy. Yeah. They'll stand and scream in front of the audience, "You are the only ones to survive. Give money to me and Jesus will come sooner. Spend more money on the church and you will be saved. And the other billions will die." And they cheer. This is love. This is love.
I know. Yeah. Hey, trust me, they show it every day on Twitter. We see the Christian love all the time on Twitter.
Yeah. The other thing that I might want to share that I touch on in my book also is how do we get our religion? And I mean, you are obviously well read. I can hear that you know everything I have to say. I can hand this over to you and you can continue on your own.
Well, let's not get carried away. That's why you're here.
Okay. But so how do we get our religion? Well, the fact is we get it from our parents in the geography where we're born. God has nothing to do with it. And a little thought experiment. Imagine the current Pope would have been born in Saudi Arabia by Saudi parents. What are the chances he would have been a Sunni Muslim
Imam
and fought? We don't know if he would have risen that high in the ranks, but he would have been there, Sunni. But he would definitely not have agreed with the Pope's religion.
Nope.
And if the Pope would have been born in Iran, the way Ayatollah Khomeini was, who had written about how you have sex with babies and what animals you should have sex with, and what you do to virgins when they're in prison to be executed, well, you should rape them first, but you can't send a girl who has not been having a man to execution. That's human. That's very human. I probably felt
very
good.
Much.
So, felt good.
I could recommend Hector Garcia, a friend of mine who's also an author as well, wrote, actually, I think I have it around here, a book that I picked up a while ago that I quite enjoyed, and it speaks very much to this sort of thing. It's called Alpha God, and it's a psychology of religious violence and oppression, and it starts from the standpoint that God seems to be just like the rest of us primates. Is the primate mindset, the animal mindset, kill the young males so that they don't challenge them, that kind of thing, right? Keep the virgins.
Well, I mean, isn't that what you're saying now, Neil? That is so good and so right. And I think the conclusion to draw from that is God, with so many human traits, envy, greed, wrath for generations, is man-made. That's why he has all his male traits, not
patriarchal.
Female.
Sure, yeah.
And that's what it is.
Yeah, females in any religious book really are considered second. Well, not any. There are some that prop up females.
There are some
but
where women's are higher, yes.
Yeah, especially a lot of the pagan beliefs where they have the goddess figure and stuff like that, and they're held in quite high regard because they're the life bringers, and I get that. But most of them are very anti-female and telling the congregation that women are worth half as much as men, if that, right? Or
well, female witnesses in Islam, they have trouble. Right. I mean, if a woman has been gang raped, in Pakistan, she will have to produce 4 witnesses to the rape. The gang rapers will probably not squeal on each other. Yeah, and since she doesn't have 4 witnesses, she ends up in jail as a hooker. Prostitution.
Yeah, prostitution. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's brutal.
But I'm just saying that. But if in Iran, if a man wants to have a prostitute, he goes to a religious leader, and he marries them for 5 hours or a day, and he pays a fee and a dowry to her. Listen, is that what God wants? It's a bit similar to Jews who go in and sabotage elevator, right? And they can't press a button, and they try to fool God by having it programmed. God knows you want to get up to the 20th floor. Press the fucking button.
Yeah, but see, I see. Living in Israel for a couple of years back in my late teens, I finished high school over there, and just going to some homes of religious, like Orthodox or even Hasidic type Jewish folks' homes, where everything's all pre-programmed. And this is back in the 80s, right? It's probably even better technology now. I kind of just shook my head. It's like, is he really going to get pissed off at you for turning on a light switch? Like, really?
Yeah. But, it's the same thing as in a way with the Mennonites and the Amish. They decided that some form of development is not good. It's sinful. And I'm asking, why didn't they say that the invention of the wheel was sinful? They didn't. That was fine with them. The invention of the wheel was fine. But everything else, like electricity and so on, was sinful. Since you brought up Judaism, let me just take one of my chapters is what is true religion. And I don't think we should leave that. The true religion. I don't think so either. You want to have a point in here, Neil?
No. Carry on with what you were saying.
So the point there I would be making is for Judaism, the Jews pray day after day for the temple to be returned.
Yes.
What is it that God really wants from us? Not just Jews, but Christians as well, because it comes from there. And He wants us to go in there and burn animals and sprinkle blood and sacrifice and sacrifice. So if the temple were actually returned, there wouldn't be a Jew left, because who except these 5% crazies would go there and do it? Doesn't exist. And in Catholicism, they don't want to admit this, but through transubstantiation, which is a fantastic word nobody's meant to understand, but it means when you put the wafer in your mouth and the wine, through transubstantiation, it turns into not a symbol for, it turns into Jesus' flesh and his blood. Now that's, as far as I'm concerned, is the definition of a cannibal. And when I discuss this with Catholic priests, they say, no. They say, you have to kill someone. No, you don't. You eat human flesh. You're a cannibal. And do people really realize what they're doing? I mean, the true religion is hidden. I'll give you another example, which I think is just great, how every Christmas the nativity scene is played out.
Yes.
And that's what I call fake news. Didn't happen like that. Nothing happened like that.
Right, yeah.
What happened was angels came down to some shepherds and said, somebody's going to be born that is high. You should go see him. So the shepherds went, somebody high, double meaning here.
Smoke a little wacky weed.
Highborn.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so they went there and sang. 40 days after the birth of Jesus,
no problem.
The woman, Mary, mother, went to the temple to cleanse herself. When Jesus was 2 years old, that's when he came, the king, Herod, came to kill the boys under two and under in the city of Bethlehem. First of all, this didn't happen, because such an atrocity we would have had in history books. The same as we, by the way, would have had about Jesus with all his miracles. Nobody's written it down. He probably didn't exist. So, but in the Gospel of Matthew, it is absolutely clear that he was visited in a house after the 40 days. There is not clear. There were not 3 wise men. There were some wise men in a house after that, and probably when he was 2 years old, and then he fled. So even that is fake news. And people still want to love that story and make sure they understand it fully. And they're so happy with seeing that they're wise men. And the worst thing about wise men, and you'll appreciate this, is the first thing they do, having followed a star. Who the hell can follow a star anywhere? Start with that.
Yeah, I've asked that question before, yes.
Yeah. But having followed a star to Israel, to Palestine, now Israel, what the first thing they do is they go to King Herod and ask him, where can we find this new king of the Jews? How wise are these wise men who could find a way from far in the east, following a star that nobody else can do, end up there, ask this question, and then have Herod upset enough to go and kill all 2-year-olds and under? So that doesn't work either.
They should have used Google Maps, if you ask me. But
yeah, well, God knew the mapping system, so he didn't have that trouble.
Yeah, he literally could have put a little arrows all the way with his big-ass God finger.
Well, I tell you what I say. Since God has been so nasty to the Jews, his beloved people, there's one thing we know. Had he just written in fire in the sky, I love the Jews, how good would it not have been? And had he not given the Jews Israel, which is surrounded by rich countries, their enemies, full of oil, and Israel has none, why didn't he give them Switzerland? What a fantastic country to have. Huh?
Hey, he could have given them the entire North American continent at the time.
He could.
I mean, other than the fact that other than the fact that there were already people there. And apparently they've recently found out that there have been people there even longer than they thought, because they found footprints that are like over 24,000 years old, which is amazing. But anyway.
So can I move from this to the title of my book, maybe? So tell you what inspired me to get the title.
Show folks there.
So in the book, I have 12 chapters with our 12 questions, and I hope you have seen them. And the title is, Why is it we're afraid of being descendants of monkeys but not incest? And what does that allude to? Well, the religious people are very upset when we say we have a common ancestor with the monkeys, but they don't mind that we all come from incest. And it was in God's hand. He could have created 2, 3, 4 families. No, he created one family, and they had to have sex with each other to procreate. Adam, Eve, 2 sons, 1 killed, and a couple more brothers and sisters. What's the moral in that? And then people say it wasn't forbidden then. And I say, fine, but God knew better.
What?
Even if you didn't. God knew better.
That's right.
It's not genetically good for us. Yeah.
Should be setting an example.
He should, but he just doesn't want to. He wants us to be fucked up.
Apparently.
Yeah. And another interesting one is, so God, all-powerful, knows everything. Who can kill God? Nobody. You can only kill God with reason, but you can't kill him by crucifixion. Impossible. Right. So let's start with religious math. 1 God, 1 Son, and 1 Holy Ghost. 1 + 1 + 1. They're all 1. So in religious math, with Christian math, 1 + 1 + 1 = 1.
Yeah.
That's a different math. So since we know that God is all-powerful, we know that people who he created cannot just kill him. So Jesus then was sent by his Father to earth to suffer and die for our sins, so God could forgive us. We have gone over that. But how did that happen? Well, there was a trial in front of Pontius Pilate where the mob is screaming, crucify him, may his blood be over us and our children. Who would ever scream a curse on their children? So you know that isn't true. It was created to create anti-Semitism by the writers of this, because they could see they wanted Pontius Pilate to wash his hands far after this had happened, and the Jews to be guilty. Nobody in their right mind would put a curse on the children, no matter what the sermon. So you know it's fake, absolutely fake.
Oh, hell yeah.
But then knowing that nobody can kill God, the only explanation then is that either he committed suicide by Roman crucifixion, which is an ancient version of suicide by cop.
Also a sin. Suicide is a sin.
Well, I know. That's what it is. It's so beautiful in paradise. Just don't make your own way in there. Just don't do that.
Yeah. You got to wait it out like the rest of us.
Yeah. Or if I can quote Professor Zizek, Dr. Zizek, who I read, and he says, when he is at the cross and he says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me?
You've forsaken me, yeah.
Yeah. That means that God has a moment, his last moment in life, is an atheistic moment when he loses faith in himself, but he is God.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah.
The way you just said that, my mind kind of had a little bit of a mini explosion because I'd never thought of it that way before. That's brilliant, Harry.
Oh, you like that? Thank you.
Thank you, Secular Pagan Mom, for the super sticker.
Yeah. Can I then bring up the people who want to do something about science and religion?
Absolutely.
And my favorite,
yeah. Oh, yeah. You can talk.
No, listen. It's your program, and I don't want to. I give my
guests
of yours
free reign. As long as it's not hate speech, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. So, in 1802, there was a very well-known French scientist who had written about the solar system, Laplace, and he was invited to the Emperor Napoleon to present his works.
That's right. Yep.
And when he so did, somebody had whispered to the emperor, "Look, Emperor, there's not a word about God in his book." So the emperor turns to Laplace and he says, "I hear that you don't have a word about God in your book." And Laplace answers calmly, "Your Highness, I don't have need for that hypothesis." Beautiful. But it doesn't end here. And I wanted to have the setup before I move to Dr. Francis Collins.
Sure.
Then he goes out and meets a colleague scientist, and he tells a story about what happened in front of Napoleon. And the colleague says to him, "Well, and God explains everything." And Francis Collins says, "Yes, he does, but he doesn't allow me to change my mind. And as a scientist, when I get new evidence, that's what I need to do." That's 1802. We now have in the United States the head of the NIH, National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, a renowned scientist. He was the leader of Genome Project, and he's written a book about the language of God, where he proves and got a $1.3 million prize, where he proves that science and faith go together. And I'm just doing two of them, not to bore you too much, but I think they're interesting. His daughter was raped. And he finds faith afterwards, was an atheist before. And I'm just asking myself, do you find faith when something bad has happened, when 230,000 people have died in a tsunami and 3 survivors? Is that when we thank on our knees? Or is it we say, if he allowed that to happen? No. So anyway, I write in my book, if God would have rendered a potential rapist limp and tied to a chair, nothing in the universe would have changed. And by the way, God could change all of this anyway because he has the power. So that's number one. Then number two, which is even worse. He says, as a scientist, I know the earth is billions of years old and the universe even more. And we have measuring instruments that prove that. So he says in his book, the only way it isn't true is that God tampers with our instruments to make it look that it's more than 7,000 years old. And then he says, and this is the brilliant line from a scientist, and who would want to worship a God like that?
That's right.
Does he get to choose? I'm saying, if that is God and that's the worst he does, that's nothing. He kills people, he maims people, he sends them out to the water, he has babies thrown on cliffs. No, this is his breaking point with God, as if he gets to choose. And the scientific way is, if God showed himself and a deceiver, would he have any choice but to worship? I wouldn't have a choice. I would have to worship him. But there's no evidence that exists. But what he does is so unscientific, and he won a $1.3 million prize for this. Unbelievable.
Yeah, but God can do anything according to these guys. So
and he doesn't. But he doesn't.
He doesn't do shit. He doesn't do anything. Yeah. He didn't and still doesn't. Exactly. There's a reason for that, people.
Yeah,
it's all in here.
He can't. He doesn't exist. We invented God. He doesn't.
That's right.
You know, my guide to my book is Occam's razor. And I like that philosopher. He basically said, the simplest answer to a question is almost always right. The way he put it is, the answer with the least hypothesis is almost right. So I'm just saying, if we have a God with all this many human traits, and we have a God that supposedly has all these godly traits, but can't do better, what is then more likely? That we invented him in our image, or he invented us not in his image, but to have something to play with? And to put it crudely, if we believe that there is an infinite universe, then I wouldn't say that that proves that anything can exist, but there's a chance of everything and anything being able to exist.
That's right.
So somewhere in another planet far, far away, there are creatures who eat with their ass and shit with their mouth and also believe that they're created in the image of God.
That's true. The whole thing just kind of rubs me the wrong way anyways, because why do we have this seemingly unending universe, although we know that there is a boundary, but still there's literally billions upon billions of galaxies out there, and his favorite people just happen to be in this little insignificant galaxy in a insignificant area of the universe on a small little blue planet, like right in the Middle East as well, like nowhere else on the globe had heard of the guy, right? So
but isn't it funny also with all these living Christians, first of all, with all their own denominations, they are the only ones they say. Then between Christians and everybody else, so everybody else is going to burn in purgatory, and that's the love. That's the love. I don't know. Do we have time for one more? Are we running out of time?
Sure. Absolutely.
I'll give you one more topic, which is free will.
Because right after this, just because of what we've been talking about, I have the page ready to go because I was meant to do it before we got started, but I'm purchasing your damn book right after this. So,
thank you. So, do we really have free will in relation to God? First of all, as I said,
no.
If you don't love Jesus the right way, when you die, you burn in purgatory. Every sin, murder, whatever you do, you can go and get absolution for if you just repent properly. And it looks sincere. The only thing you can't repent, guess what that is? Blasphemy on the Holy Spirit. Now,
I know, like what?
I mean, this is so amazing, which just shows that the same thing as when you come to a Christian, a child, they lose their problem with original sin. But can you imagine that in a Catholic church, the godparents will have to say, we renounce Satan? Who the hell doesn't do that? What kind of a ceremony is that you have to state that you renounce Satan? And I can say, if God let him exist, why? Yeah. So, and perhaps, and I'm coming to another point after the free will. And so, but God manipulates our free will. First of all, we get them in the area where we live, and we believe then that all the others are wrong and I'm right. I have a whole chapter about worshipping on your left foot and the right foot with a new God called extraordinary. And after a while, theology develops and they start fighting each other. That's theology. So free will is, first of all, within the boundaries of what you're indoctrinated in. But then the second part of that is, we know that God manipulates it. And how does he do that? Do you know the 10 plagues? That's a very interesting story. The 10 plagues.
Every Passover.
Every Passover. The 10 plagues is funny because God says, Moses, go negotiate. And says, I'm not a good speaker. I'll bring your stuttering brother along and he will help you, Aaron. God cannot do anything on his own, obviously. He's out of this and he can't. So having sent him there, he started to negotiate, and then the snakes, and then the first and the other and the second. The funny thing is, God could have just had Pharaoh let them go. But what does God do? He hardens Pharaoh's heart. Which means he's sitting up there knowing all the outcomes, and he plays a game with himself, with his beloved people still stuck there. Isn't that completely outrageous? Outrageous.
It's asinine. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I thought asinine was when Italian talks about an ass of a lady, says pass. It's a 9. It's another 10.
No. Well, Maybe.
I got it.
I've been to Italy, so that's probably true.
Yeah. So let me end with the Lord's Prayer, which I think tells it all. For millennia,
okay. Do we have to bow
Christians
our heads,
have been praying the following line to God, and lead us not into temptation. Why the hell do they pray that to God? That's Satan's job.
Yeah.
And they have done that without reflecting about how evil God must be to even dare to lead them into temptation. I think that would be a nice place to end this, unless you want to speak about something else.
Well, no, what I would do before we close this out and take a bit of a break and then jump into an after party, I kind of want you to sort of let people know where they can find all find your book and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and how they can get in touch with you if they wish to, for any particular reason. So just sort of give people a little bit about it.
Yeah. So the book is Why Is It We're Afraid of Being Descendants of Monkeys? It's easily available on Amazon and other fine bookstores. And when you go inside the book, there is a QR code, which brings us to the publisher. There is an email where you can, there it is. And there's an email there where you can communicate with us. And I'm, of course, curious about any reactions I can get. I have 12, I think, very interesting questions. And perhaps now that you bring up the book, I would like to end with an ending in my postscript, if I may.
Absolutely.
Which is how I have early on the book written about Amanpour making an interview with a Jesuit priest who was so happy about God, the Pope being in favor of civil unions. First of all, it begs the question, who's the boss, God or the Pope? And then
the Pope probably thinks he is.
He thinks he is, yeah. But then he has also proven it's not a religious institute. Rewrite it all, become better.
Right.
So what happens then is we are sitting on Inauguration Day in the United States, and this is another one how media handles religion in the most incredible way.
Oh,
so, and I'm going to read from my book, if I may. Finally, a point on media and how carefully they treat religion. That's my last words in the book. On January 2021, just before 9 a.m. Eastern Time, before the new President Joe Biden was inaugurated, and before President Trump left office, CNN had a panel that commented very positively, even admiringly, on President-elect Biden's true faith. He was going to church, and it was interesting, they noted that he was a frequent churchgoer, not like some other politicians who did not have his genuine faith. More disturbing, though, is that the panel's admiration was directed towards a man, one about to become president, who potentially has a completely irrational belief system. There is no reason to believe that all religious presidents will be treated equally. President Biden is a Roman Catholic, which nowadays must be considered mainstream in the US. That leaves the question still hanging there. Would the panel have been equally full of admiration if the president-elect were in Muslim or Jewish? But then we come to the final point here, and there's my last paragraph. In difficult times, when tough, vital, urgent decisions have to be made, should we admire a president who goes down on his knees and asks God for guidance? The issue isn't that we believe that President Biden would not be able to make the right decision, but this to serve as an example of the deference with which religion and religious people are handling the media. What if we had a truly religious president who, rather than reacting decisively as deadly missiles were heading for the US, chose instead to pray for God to intervene? Would God answer? Would God give guidance? Would God intervene? Those are my last words. And I think that's a very nice way of ending and also showing how fake it is when they discuss this. Nobody wants to deal with religion the way it really is.
That's right. That's very true. And it's going to be really hard. But we're going to be doing this for centuries to come. I'm sorry to say, but we're going to be battling religious mindsets for a long time, because it has been so within us as a species for so long that it's like you're wearing your favorite outfit and everyone in the world is trying to get you to take that off and put something new on. It's really hard to do. Right. So, Yeah.
So Neil, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I've had some fun on this show, I must say, and I like the way you do this. You just taught a little bit, show direction, and
yeah, sure,
handle it masterly. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, Harry, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. From what I've read of your book, I haven't read the whole thing yet, of course, but I plan to because I'm going to buy it. And I think the questions that you pose are brilliant. And I think that they're questions that should be asked. And I think these questions, if asked the right way at the right times, could actually change some people's perceptions on what religion's all about.
Can I tell you about this book? It is not meant to be anti. So the way I see it, this is a book that asks questions and guides you to your own answers in some ways. But I'm clear where I stand, very clear. So for believers, it is a challenging book. For people who don't believe, it is an informative book. And for people on the fence, they will get some guidance where to go. That's
right. I would have put it exactly the same way. It is going to be challenging to the believer, possibly helpful to the doubter, and it is definitely going to be informative, to the non-believer, for sure. And thank you, Ox, for the $2 super chat. Thank you very much for hanging out with us too. Actually, everyone in the chat, thank you so much for hanging out and being a part of what we do here. Now we are going to do.
Are you posting this on YouTube eventually, or?
It's on right now. We are live on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Right now,
so I can get hold to this if I want to, and can I post it on my own account? Send me a link to it, please.
Sure. I'll do
so
that
will you send a link to it? If people want to speak to me in your afterpod, I'll be happy to join.
Yeah, well, you're more than welcome to join us, and they'll be in there with us.
Okay, and you'll send a link.
Yes, I will. You betcha.
Thank you very, very much. My pleasure.
All right. I'm just going to say goodbye to everyone. So a couple of things before we go, though, guys. First of all, thanks everyone in the chat for hanging out, and everyone on Twitch and watching on Twitter as well. Thanks to my amazing patrons. You guys really are the backbone of my show. Without you, I probably couldn't do what I do. Quick reminder that Randolph and myself are starting up our own call-in show called True North Talk. You can head over to www.truenorthtalk.ca and you can find more information about it there. Myself and many other good people are new hosts on the revamped, relaunched Nonprofit Show, which is an ACA product that airs at 3 p.m. Central between Talk Ethan and the Atheist Experience. And it was supposed to be today, but we're bumping it to next week because I screwed up and forgot I had the noon show today. So we couldn't do Atheist Drinking Out Loud today. So it'll be next Saturday. You can catch Andy, Seamus, and myself talking about ridiculous things that believers believe and having a couple of beers over it as well. And right on. Until next time, guys, like I always say at the end of these shows, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we will see you guys next time. Untangle